Well, hello again, everybody, and thank you for joining us on the live wire on Inside UNC Charlotte. Today we have yet another topic that will give us some time to dig into an area of policy and compliance here at UNC Charlotte, and it's an area that's become part of life for most major universities here in the United States. We're going to be talking about Title IX and the Violence Against Women Act. And I think one of the things I hope we'll come away with is a better sense of the breadth of this topic and the roles that each of us in our jobs here at the university play in bringing about the university's compliance and adherence. And maybe we'll raise our own awareness today in our conversation about what's going on here on our campus and how we're like other universities, how we're not like other universities, but what's going on in higher education in this important area. And our guest is Don Floyd, who is relatively new in your role as Title IX coordinator here at UNC Charlotte. And as a way to expand on that introduction, Don will give us the overview of you, where you come from, and what you're here to do as our Title IX coordinator.
Well, thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.
I am a native North Carolinian. I was born and raised in Wilkes County, North Carolina. I am the daughter of two Appalachian State graduates.
Heard of that school, sure.
And I attended Appalachian myself. I
received.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. My blood is slowly turning green.
That's all right.
But I've always been black and gold. Appalachian is very close to my heart. I received a bachelor's degree there in political science, mm-hmm. and then I stayed and received a master's degree in higher education administration. After receiving my master's degree, I worked at the North Carolina School of the Arts, which is another UNC
Sure.
system school, as a residence life area coordinator. Then I went on to be the assistant director of student life at Manhattan School of Music. And then I took a really bold turn and decided to go to law school. I went to law school in New York, and after graduation from law school, I worked at a law firm in New York City for a couple of years. Then moved back to Charlotte, and for the last 6 years before I arrived at UNC Charlotte, I was a senior litigation associate at Shoemaker, Loop & Kendrick in Charlotte.
And so here on campus, your base of operation is where, in case folks want to come and talk to you?
So I'm physically located in Cato Hall on the third floor.
Sure.
Happy to have guests there.
All right. Well, we'll find out more from you and get to know you better in this next half hour or so as we talk about the focus of your work. And I was reminded in preparing for this, and reminded from a presentation that I saw you give recently on Title IX, that Title IX has been a fact of life since it was passed in 1972, and that's getting to be a long time ago. But to get rolling in our discussion, let's touch on a refresher course on Title IX. We'll take a look at what the law actually says, and it says that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. In the case of UNC Charlotte, that would be us.
It would be.
In the case of us in 2014, not to sound insensitive, but how big of an issue is this anymore? Haven't we grown up?
I hope we are in the process of growing up.
Yeah.
To your point, Title IX has been around a long time.
Mm-hmm.
For many years, the focus of Title IX was really on the athletics piece of it, ensuring that there was equity between men and women in athletics.
Wouldn't that still be where we hear about it, or at least our minds tell us? So Title IX is an athletics thing, right? Every time you add a men's sport, you have to add a women's sport, right?
Right.
Which is usually a great thing. And
exactly.
It's actually fantastic. But
well, and when I talk to people about Title IX, I've certainly had people stop and say, well, wait a minute, isn't that just the law that says we have to have equity in athletics?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer to that is yes. But what a lot of people don't know is that there's a whole nother piece of Title IX that deals with discrimination on the basis of sex. And basically what it says is that any institution who's receiving federal funding, like UNC Charlotte, cannot discriminate on the basis of sex. And what we've what we're looking at now is that it's been construed to include sexual harassment and sexual assault.
Yeah. So in the next few minutes, we'll talk a little bit more about what that means here locally in our university community, and are we doing a lot of things poorly or wrong? Are we, you know, what is it like in a typical university community, and what do we look like at UNC Charlotte? But let's take a look as well at. I'll try to advance this slide here. Let's take a look at the program that you operate in the next couple of graphics, and just kind of go through the scope of your work as the Title IX coordinator, and again, getting into some of the things you're looking at beyond athletics, and then also who across campus is involved in helping you in your work as the coordinators.
Sure. Well, Title IX requires all colleges and universities who receive federal funding to designate a Title IX coordinator to oversee compliance with the law. And UNC Charlotte has always had a Title IX coordinator. Before I arrived on campus, it was Jeannie Madoran in Human Resources. And so that's not really new, having a designated Title IX coordinator. What is new is the university acknowledging that this is a very important issue and putting resources towards the issue, including the creation of a full-time Title IX coordinator position, and that's what I'm doing.
How common is that across the UNC system or across the nation in schools like us?
It's becoming more common. UNC Charlotte actually was one of the first schools in the UNC system to create a full-time Title IX coordinator position. So we're on the leading edge of that. It is becoming more common. There are a lot of schools around the country who just will never have the resources to have a full-time position. And those schools are doing the best that they can with the resources that they have. And at those types of schools, the Title IX coordinator would be somebody who wears that hat plus other hats and isn't able to designate their full time to it, but is serving the same role that I'm serving here at UNC Charlotte.
Okay.
So the position was created and I started in June. I am housed in the Division of Student Affairs and located in Cato. There are 4 Title IX deputy coordinators who are people around campus who have been designated as deputies who are part of the Title IX leadership team and assist in everything that I do. And those deputy coordinators are Catherine Hall-Hertel in Academic Affairs, Jeannie Madoran in Human Resources, Christine Reed-Davis for Students, and Kim Whitestone in Athletics.
Could you use more if you had them?
I could use many more.
Yeah.
We are in the process of hiring a part-time Title IX investigator who will be responsible for investigating all reports of sexual assault and other sexual misconduct that we receive. We are also in the process of creating a Title IX committee, which will be a campus-wide committee made up of students, faculty, and staff that will serve as an advisory board for me in the Title IX office to really take a look at how we do things and make recommendations for how we can make things better.
And as you said, Title IX, I don't know if we would use the word progressed, but the focus has evolved into where we are today, where a lot of your work is focused on claims along the lines of sexual misconduct or sexual harassment. Is that that's a fair depiction of the world in which you live? And let's talk a little bit about what you do through your office when there is a report of harassment or assault or other misconduct, and this is what is required under the law.
Correct. So there are 3 primary areas of responsibility for me. One is educating our campus and creating a culture of awareness and prevention, sort of coordinating those activities. ensuring that we're complying with the law. And then the third other major area is what you're touching on now, which is investigating any complaints that are made to someone at the university and funneled up to me of an incident of sexual misconduct, which includes sexual assault, sexual harassment, or dating violence, domestic violence, or stalking. When it comes to sexual misconduct, if the university learns about an incident of sexual assault, we have to investigate what happened, and then we have to stop the discrimination. We have to remedy the effects and stop it from occurring again. And that's a big job. But that's what Title IX requires the university to do for every incident that's reported.
It's a big job in a big university community that we often liken unto a city unto itself. So with that observation made, when we're talking about if there is such thing as a typical Title IX violation, which I'm sure I shouldn't say that, but are we talking about students and off-campus people? Are we talking about faculty and staff? Are we talking about any combination? And how does that generally break down in terms of the issues that you're looking into as the investigator?
Well, the incidents really do involve all of those people that you mentioned. We are certainly concerned about any incident of sexual assault or sexual misconduct that occurs with any of our students or occurs on or near our campus. And what I'm seeing in the reports that I'm getting is that we do have cases involving students and visitors to our campus. We have student-on-student cases. We have student and staff cases. There's really any combination of incidents that you could put together. And under the law, we are obligated to receive reports and investigate all of those incidents. Now, the way that we handle those reports and investigations may differ depending on who is involved. So let's say we have an incident of one of our students was allegedly assaulted by a person who is not a member of our community. So is not a student or staff or faculty, but the incident happened on campus. We will certainly investigate that incident and provide resources to the alleged survivor, but we're going to be limited in terms of what we can do with the accused because he or she is not a member of our community. Right. So we won't be able to pursue charges under our Code of Student Responsibility.
But in the case of the person who's been violated, are we talking only about people who are victimized on campus, or are we talking about if you are a member of the UNC Charlotte community by virtue of being a student or a faculty member or a staff member anywhere? Which,
if you are a student or faculty or staff, we are obligated to respond to that. Okay, even though the incident may have happened off campus, one of the goals really at UNC Charlotte is getting the necessary help and resources.
Okay. Well,
to the
clarify,
survivor.
just in my mind, maybe I'm the only one, but I probably am. But if for instance, when you're talking about a third party involved, let's say something happens at a student party or even just a date between two individuals where a third individual shows up and something untoward takes place. If that's taking place in a student apartment off campus, for instance, that's still something that you would get involved in?
If it involves one of our students, then we're going to want to know about it and figure out the best way to respond.
How do you work in relation to our own police and public safety?
I work very closely with police and public safety. They are great partners in awareness and prevention of sexual assault. Students have really the choice under the law to decide whether he or she wants to report an incident to police and public safety or to the Title IX coordinator or to both. Yeah. And there are times when incidents are reported to the police and that will trigger a police investigation. And and then I will also investigate it. And so we'll sort of work simultaneously. The police will conduct their investigation, and I'll conduct the university investigation from a Title IX perspective. There will be cases where a student may choose not to report the incident to police. And in that case, only an investigation by the university or the Title IX office will occur. But we do work together. Police and public safety are specially trained investigators, and they're very good at what they do, and I rely on them and their expertise where a student has chosen to report the incident to the police, and they are also conducting an investigation.
All right. We're talking about the breadth and scope of Title IX and, in a minute, other related legislation with Don Floyd, who is UNC Charlotte's Title IX coordinator. And Don, I think that I might not be alone in wondering, as we start to talk about this and we start to talk about all that you're doing and the fact that you're doing it here on campus, it can't help but make us wonder, do we have big problems here at UNC Charlotte, or is this typical and it's just part of life at a large public university in the United States? Obviously, we should be concerned. We should be concerned if there were, one incident in 5 years. There's a few more than that. But what's going on here at UNC Charlotte? And I guess for the sake of perspective, but not necessarily comparison, what's it like at other places like us? Are we in trouble, bad, and compared to others, or what's the situation?
No, we're not. Incidents of sexual misconduct, sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, stalking are occurring at all colleges and universities. And in that regard, UNC Charlotte is no different from what other schools down the road or schools across the country are dealing with. One of the really positive, I believe, impacts of all the media attention to this topic is that for years, I believe that colleges and universities were hesitant to make public their numbers when it came to these types of incidents, because they were afraid that it would make their campus look like an unsafe place, and students wouldn't want to enroll. And I think what everybody is finally realizing, which I think is a huge step forward, is that these incidents are happening at all colleges and universities. And it's now freed us to move the conversation towards what can we do about it, and how can we handle it, as opposed to trying to cover up or not be as open about the incidents.
And what we can do about it has to include talking particularly to students about perhaps avoiding putting yourself in situations where we know statistically bad things are more likely to happen than not.
Absolutely. So, we are really trying to take a holistic approach to this topic and combine things that we know go together, like alcohol and drug use and abuse and sexual assault. We are really trying to really address all of the issues that come into play, including safety tips, how you can stay safe, providing resources for students that might allow them to be safer on our campus, like helping students get access to security apps on their mobile phone, which we know students use all the time and always have with them. So we really are trying to take a holistic approach.
Let's talk a little bit about an area that is related to what we've been talking about in Title IX, but specifically what you do under the requirements of the Violence Against Women Act and also the Campus Sexual Violence Elimination Act, whose acronym is Campus SAVE, which is nice. What are these laws intended to expand the scope of essentially the spirit of Title IX, or where did these come from?
Well, the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, which you often hear referred to as VAWA, was a law that was passed in 2013 and enacted in 2014. And its scope is a little different from Title IX.
Mm-hmm.
It covers sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking.
Mm-hmm.
And it really does, it does some similar things to Title IX, but it also does some different things.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, the VAWA, you'll sometimes hear VAWA referred to as Campus Save. Campus Save is the part of VAWA. VAWA is a much bigger law. Campus Save is the part of VAWA that really impacts colleges and universities the most. And Campus Save put forward some new requirements for us in cases of sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking, including that we now have to provide written information to any student who or employee who reports an incident of sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, or stalking. Mm-hmm. So we have to physically hand that survivor a packet of information about our policies and protocols and resources available. We have to handle those cases, the investigation of those cases in a particular manner on our campus. And we are also now required under VAWA to provide educational programming for incoming students and new employees, both when they arrive and throughout the course of their college career, aimed at sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking prevention and awareness.
Yeah. We've obviously had some very troubling news coming from the National Football League in the last
Mm-hmm.
few weeks. And is there a sense for folks in your profession that maybe some good will come out of this and that we're raising the volume on a national discussion about these issues?
I think, although very sad, some of the reports that are coming out about players in the NFL, ultimately, when these things come out, it does lead to dialogue and discussion. Mm-hmm. It leads to an awareness, and I do think that it leads to changes.
Yeah.
And so I think ultimately it will be a good thing that we're having a national discussion about this. And certainly domestic violence and dating violence are incidents just like sexual assault that we take very seriously, and those types of incidents are happening on our campus.
Yeah.
And we are responding to them.
Well, and I know we'll show a couple slides next from your presentation. And although they refer to the citations and resources pages, we won't show that. But if folks want to know your sources, they can contact you. But these are the ones that I think tend to bring it home, and I think they're numbers that probably most of us hear once or twice. Hopefully they don't go in one ear and out the other. But these numbers refer to what's happening nationally. Mm-hmm. And where does UNC Charlotte come in comparison to these numbers? In other words, let's elaborate a little bit more, kind of bring it home about what's the reality of the issues here on our campus.
So the statistics that you often hear out there is that 1 in 5 college women report having been sexually assaulted at some point during their college career. Mm-hmm. And as with any study or statistic, people dispute that. Mm-hmm. And you can go out and find reports of people who have discredited those stats. That happens with any time. But
when we're talking about rape, we're not.
Right.
I mean, we're not drawing some line or including just an unwanted advance. We're talking about actual attempted rape.
That's right. And there are a lot of people who think that number is actually low because those are reported rapes.
Yeah.
So it doesn't include rapes of survivors who actually didn't report it. Mm-hmm. What some of the other statistics show is that the majority of females who are assaulted on college campuses, sexually assaulted, there's been alcohol involved, and in the majority of the cases, the survivor actually knows the accused.
Yeah.
And so that really paints a picture of the reality that I'm seeing here at UNC Charlotte, which is that a lot of the cases, the majority of the cases do involve students who know each other, and something has happened with alcohol involved, and the lines have become blurred, and those are certainly the most difficult cases.
And clearly that's a large platform in the education process when it comes to alcohol and abuse of alcohol. If only we could wave a wand and change college culture across the country, and certainly we're not suggesting this is a problem unique to UNC Charlotte.
No,
So,
absolutely not.
yeah. All right, and then your other slide on this, under why all the fuss, 64 at least colleges and universities are under investigation. Are those institutions that aren't taking the compliance as seriously as they should? Or I mean, what's that about?
I don't think so. I think that the majority of colleges and universities out there are doing the best that they can to try to comply with the requirements of Title IX and VAWA. Unfortunately, a lot of schools don't have the resources that UNC Charlotte is fortunate enough to have, where you have full-time people committed to these issues. And so I think colleges and universities across the board are trying to do the best they can. You know, you hear in the news about some colleges and universities where maybe they weren't doing the best that they can, and I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but I do think that most colleges and universities are trying to comply. Unfortunately, I keep having to change the slide because I believe it's now up to over 70 colleges and universities are currently under investigation. I want to be clear that not all of those investigations resulted from a complaint to the Office of Civil Rights.
Yeah.
Sometimes the Office of Civil Rights will investigate a school without a complaint. We just don't know the breakdown of those that they're investigating as the result of a complaint versus an investigation that OCR is doing for some other reason.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit, give us your best advice for those of us who are among the staff and faculty here at UNC Charlotte, and that is the bulk of the folks who will be seeing us right now or later on YouTube. What are things that we could do to help within the issue? You know, most of us have contact with students, whether they're student employees in our office, if we're staff members, or obviously as students in a classroom. What are the things we can do that are appropriate within the boundaries of the relationship, but to, I don't know, encourage students, particularly in some of these areas of the warning signs, or, you know, is it okay to get up in front of students today and just say, you know what, if you just knock off the drinking, you could probably help a lot of the situations that you want to avoid as students? What can we realistically, legally, appropriately do to help?
Well, that's a great question, because certainly this is going to take an entire campus to change a culture. I very strongly believe that with students, if their faculty members or their staff that they work with are supportive of an issue and are willing to talk about it and get behind it, they will care about it and they will take it seriously. And so I encourage faculty members to talk about this in their classes, you know, to put information in their syllabus about it. I think there are a lot of things that faculty and staff can do. One is just being there for students who want to report incidents. Yeah. You know, faculty and staff, there are obligations for faculty and staff who learn about incidences. They'll have to, or incidents, they'll have to report it on to me. But we believe that ultimately you're helping the student who reports an incident to you by telling me, because when I'm told, then we can get the student the resources and help and support that they need. Yeah. We are working really hard with the Center for Wellness Promotion to go out and educate our campus and our community on issues around sexual violence, including bystander intervention training. This is something that the White House has talked a lot about in their White House task force report. And then tomorrow, they're actually coming out with a model program. But there's a huge push right now for bystander intervention training, which is training students, staff, and faculty on how to recognize and safely intervene if they are witnessing a situation that may be dangerous for somebody.
Yeah. I feel like we live in such a culture now that it's so increasingly dominated by laws and regulations. But I think the interaction that we have with students is great. It's got to be upheld as one of the great things about being at a university community. And are we allowed as members of the staff and faculty to get to know our students to the point of saying, what's going on this weekend? What are you doing? And if I'm going to a party, are we allowed just to say, like we might say to our own kids, be careful out there and don't do dumb things? Can we do that?
I think so. I mean, I think it's. I think any support that we can show to students and advice that we can give them. I mean, certainly, we are working very hard on trying to bring in alcohol and drug use and abuse into the discussion, because that really is a huge piece of it.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that we're doing that is through this online module called Think About It that we are purchasing and customizing to make available for all of our incoming students. And that is a very engaging and compelling program. It's an interactive online module that students can complete. And as a faculty or a staff member, one thing that you could do that would be incredibly helpful for us, because that module does include discussion about alcohol, drugs, and sexual violence all in one module, is talk to students about it and tell them, you should do this. It's gonna be made available to you, and it's really important. So I encourage you to do that. Yeah. So that's one way that staff and faculty can open up the discussion with students about these topics.
Well, and I'm sure that as the year goes on and the years go on and people get to know you and what you're here to do a little bit better and ask you to come and present to their teams, I think that the outcome can only be positive. But let's close by just going through real quickly a couple slides that talk about what you're working on in this academic year, your priorities and initiatives under Title IX that you have creatively titled
9 for 9.
9 for 9. Go ahead.
Well, we are working on looking at all of our campus policies and protocols, and that's one area where I think the Title IX committee will be incredibly helpful, because I'll get feedback and input from faculty, staff, and students. We are working very hard to make sure our system and our process is fair and impartial for everyone involved, including survivors and the accused and witnesses who may get called in to be part of an investigation. I'm working very closely with Nicole Madonna Rosario, who is our interpersonal violence specialist. A lot of people may not know that we have a full-time person dedicated to interpersonal violence prevention, and she's the person who's really going around and doing a lot of these educational and awareness programs, including bystander intervention training on our campus. I've already talked about the Think About It module. We're really excited about that. We are working on publication of an interpersonal violence policy and resource guide, which is a booklet that we can give to survivors who report an incident of sexual assault or dating violence, domestic violence, or stalking. A lot of people probably have heard about a campus climate survey that colleges and universities are now being encouraged to do. We have committed to a campus climate survey that we're going to do in spring of 2015, which will give us wonderful information about what our students think about what we're doing on our campus to address this issue, how effective our programs are, and really what are our deficiencies and what do students still need, and how we can make our program better. I've talked about the Title IX committee and the Title IX office. It is a new office, so I'm going to be working really hard to develop the structure for the office. I am working really hard to coordinate Title IX activities across campus. So I'm really trying to go out and listen to what people have to say and bring everybody into the discussion regardless of what constituency they are from. And I'm trying to stay up to date with the current and pending legislation and ensure that UNC Charlotte is complying with all of the laws and best practices that are out there.
All right. Well, you know, and in a perfect world, we wouldn't need you here, but unfortunately, we do. But fortunately, you are here, and I hope that the folks who've been watching this edition of the Live Wire will take note and get to know your work better. And I'll put up a little image of your website so folks know that simply go to Title IX, which is Title IX. .uncc.edu and learn a little bit more about the work that Don Floyd is doing as UNC Charlotte's Title IX coordinator. And want to, as a way of closing, obviously say thank you for joining us. When we have you back, I think we're going to be asking you for all signs of progress in your work. So be prepared for that.
Happy to provide it.
The next round of your presentation will be all about the even more good things that you've been accomplishing here. And thank you all for continuing to watch the Live Wire. We don't know necessarily who you are, but we do get a report each week about how many individual view sites are up, and the numbers are very good this year, and we're very pleased to know that we're reaching you. And as always, if you have suggestions or topics you'd like to see us explore on this weekly live webcast, please do so. And join us again next week at the same time for another great edition of the Live Wire on Inside UNC Charlotte. Until then, thank you very much.